What's up, investors? It's the Russian dude. Let's get straight to the point and talk about some ridiculous Russian propaganda. Whew. Yes, you guessed it right, the kid is sleeping, so that's as loud as I can get. Okay, you already know the main propagandist in Russia, Vladimir Solovyov, who is spreading the toxicity in every layer of the society. And most of the time he is doing it relying on extremely unconfirmed sources. Well, recently he even overshadowed himself, because you already know this incident with the president of Iran, right? With the hard landing. Well, apparently, according to French sources within the French government, which only personally respond to Vladimir Solovyov requests, he said that he knows for sure, he knows 100% that this hard landing, this was not an incident at all. Because according to his sources within the French government, the person behind this was from French special services under the name of Helicopter. Helicopter. Long story short, this was a bamboozlement, this helicopter story, this was just a troll video, this was simply a joke. Some French YouTuber, French blogger recorded this video like kinda mocking propagandists and saying in the end that, guys, this is just a joke. Well, apparently this was still enough for Vladimir Solovyov to bring this video to the federal channel in Russia and say that this is the West who is behind the elimination of Putin's #1 biggest ally. Well, now at least you know the trustworthiness of the sources that the Russian propaganda uses. But okay, so now let's get a little bit more serious, and let's first of all talk about purge inside Kremlin 2.0. Then we're gonna talk about the situation in the east and why Russians are literally sacrificing their Crimean logistics, and then some Z soldiers getting desperate and starting to surrender to Ukrainians in Robotyne. To begin with this Kremlin Purge 2.0, so there is this Russian commander Ivan Popov, who recently, just like a lot of his predecessors, was accused of stealing a lot of money from the Russian budget, from the Ministry of Defense specifically. What he is being accused of is that he took approximately 2,000 tons or something like this of metallic structures, which were supposed to be used to construct defense fortifications. This stealing was approximately worth of 100 million rubles, which is like $1 million or so. But the key point in this story, as always, is that back in 2023 in July he did express his concerns to the Ministry of Defense of Russia, specifically to Valery Gerasimov, saying that the Russian army is undersupplied, the discipline is... He was basically complaining to Valery Gerasimov. Surprisingly, not. Within 24 hours of this complaint, he was relieved from his position and he was sent to the business trip in Syria. Well, apparently recently he returned to Russia and immediately this fraud system of stealing metal was uncovered, and now he is again facing prosecution. So as you can see, any single Russian commander who was in one way or another related to Gerasimov, Shoigu, Ministry of Defense, who was at some point unsatisfied with the things going around, suspiciously all of them, they end up in prison. Well, what a surprise. Enough of this. Now, as promised, let's switch our attention to the east of Ukraine, to Kharkov frontline, and why Russians decided to sacrifice their Crimean logistics. But first of all, guys, before we proceed, if you don't mind, can you please simply like this video, subscribe to my channel, helps tremendously with my work. This helps a lot with the anti-YouTube algorithm, which is pushing down my videos. For this, guys, thank you all as always so much. You can also check my second channel, The Russian Dude Investing, where I talk about the news from the stock market if you're interested. The link is down below, the new video is already live. Right, to begin with, right here is the video from Vovchansk along Kharkov frontline, where Russians literally for no reason decided to drop a cap on a residential, on literally the entire house, which obviously just became leveled with the ground. No report that Ukrainians were inside there, this is still a civilian settlement with residents living inside of it. Next is the video from Pokrovsky, where there has been another attempt by Russians using a couple of armored vehicles and a tank, and this one was successfully repelled by Ukrainians. So as you can see, Russians are simply not able to advance by foot or even with the support of their military vehicles. That is why they resort to their all-time favorite tactics, just fully destroying cities to the ground. Such as, for example, right here, unfortunately, is the footage from Bilohirivka, and then another one is from Chasiv Yar. In Bakhmut, there are still activities happening every single day, and more representatives from the International Legion come to this settlement to fight alongside Ukrainians. Such as, for example, the most recent one shows us the work of Colombian soldiers, and previously, if you remember from my video from my last week, there were Brazilian mercenaries. And by the way, guys, every single photo and video which I do show in my episodes, full and uncensored versions, as always you can find on my Patreon, the link is down below. There is 1 week of free access for every single one of you to try it, to see if you like it or not. Once again, the link to my Patreon is down below. Our next stop brings us to Ochretnya, and as you can see right here, first of all, Ukrainians used a drone to find the small base of Russian drone operators, and then later they did send their own Ukrainian FPV drone, and this base became fully unusable with everyone who was inside of it. Then in Donetsk, right here, you can see that the construction of the heavily fortified defense structures, they resumed, and I would even say they intensified, the buildings intensified recently, and specifically Ukrainians brought a lot of electronic warfare equipment, because as you can see, the modern warfare is using a lot of drones, both the land ones and obviously the flying drones. So this electronic warfare equipment is as important as regular conventional methods of dealing war stuff. And then right here is reportedly a video from the close proximity to Mariupol, where we once again can see Russians building and using their brand new railway system, which connects the newly occupied territories in Ukraine. The reason for this it is because the Crimean bridge is no longer safe for them, so they simply do not want to use it. Not that many military equipment is being transported there anyways for a very long time, because Ukrainians already showed them and the rest of the world that they can and they will continue targeting the Crimean bridge. That is why this new railway system of Russians is basically the new way of transporting logistics supplies along once again southern and eastern parts in Ukraine. Basically, this video allows us to assume that Russians decided to fully abandon the idea and pretty much sacrifice the idea of using the Crimean logistics. And instead, they will be heavily relying on this new railway system, which once again is still under the construction, but it already reportedly connects some major cities in the southern eastern parts of Ukraine. But obviously, this is a fully legitimate target for Ukrainians. They should and they will be attacking this railway system, and to be honest, it will be a little bit easier for them to do it, because it is much closer than the Crimean bridge. Well, Russians obviously they understand this as well, but guys, unfortunately we do have to take into consideration that repairing a railway section is much easier than repairing the entire section of the bridge literally in the middle of the sea. That is why the logistics of Russians in this particular area unfortunately might improve at least a little bit. And ultimately, now let's switch our attention to the south of Ukraine, and our first stop brings us to Stara Zburivka, where once again Ukrainians were able to discover a temporarily small camp of Russians, and they were able to target it and destroy it. And yet another even more extraordinary video came to us from Robotyne, which, by the way, according to Russian sources, they already captured this city like 3, 4, 5, 6 different times. And according to satellite images, according to maps, according to the Western intelligence, Ukrainians, it is still under the control by Ukrainians. Well, apparently every single time Russians say they captured it again, it only devalues the actual trustworthiness of their information, which is no surprise the way they do their propaganda, but that doesn't matter that much, because what we see right here is a Russian soldier. He is literally surrendering to a Ukrainian drone. You can only imagine how desperate this person became, not even to wait for actual people. He just saw the very first whatever, like drone, flying drone, and then that's it, I'm out of here. This is not my war, I don't know what I'm fighting for, I just gonna save my life and just, this is not me. I don't belong here. This is not the very first, not the very last time for Ukrainians, so they already know exactly what to do. They simply guide these Russian soldiers with their drone to their nearest military base of obviously Ukrainians. This person then is being safely transported to this so-called exchange fund, so I mean, yes, this is like literally the best thing you can do as a Z soldier on the territory of Ukraine. And if you do remember one of my previous week's videos, we also talked about something similar which happened in Kherson Islands along the Dnipro River. Russians were also surrendering to Ukrainians. More and more of them are getting extremely desperate, they do not see the purpose of them being in Ukraine, they do not see the end goal, there is nothing happening in the south except just random combat activities which can happen at any hour, day or night or in the morning. So it was only a matter of time when things like this started to happen. And the more publicity these events receive, the more Russian soldiers will follow their example. And even though nothing much is happening right now in the south of Ukraine, we do have some even more evidence that a lot of literally disoriented Z forces are being consolidated and are assembling to the North of Sumy region. Also, a majority of them were just transported there like, hey, get in the truck, don't ask questions, soon you will know what's happening. Because yes, according to the Western intelligence, satellite images, drone footage, literally these Z soldiers right now, they're like, what is going on? Why are we here? And this chapter is available right now on my Patreon. This is just me, guys, saying thank you so much for your support. Because of this anti-YouTube algorithm working against me, right now the Russian youth is not even close to what it used to be. But thanks to you, thanks to Patreon members, the Russian youth keeps going. So guys, if you want to support my project, see this extra chapter and all the hundreds of uncensored footage every single week, please go ahead and check my Patreon, the link is down below. Literally the best way to support the channel for this. Thank you so much. Guys, as always, thank you so much for watching. Please don't forget to subscribe if you like this style of daily news updates. Don't forget about my second channel, The Russian Dude Investing, and all the other useful links are down below. My PayPal, Instagram, Patreon, and obviously merch, which is now for such a better quality, guys. You just have to try it. Go ahead and all the links are down below. Thanks so much for watching. See you tomorrow.